Hey everyone, welcome to this week's Azure Infrastructure Update. It is the 13th of June. And a number of actually pretty cool updates this week. As always, if it's useful, a like, subscribe, comment and share is appreciated, and hit that bell icon. Firstly, new videos this week. So I did really an exploration of, can I really mimic the functionality of blueprints without actually using a blueprint? Now you can do most of it. There's a few things you couldn't do around deny assignments, but basically I go into things like role-based access control, policy assignment, resource group creation, locking, all using templates. And in the demo I use Bicep, but I show the ARM JSON as well. And then I did a deep dive into managed disks, all the different types, how we think about the performance, the bursting characteristics, how we can do different types of monitoring, even splitting up monitoring of data disks. So a deep dive into that. New features. So on the compute side, really just the DC SV2 had a price reduction. So this is the whole secure compute. This uses the Intel SGX secure enclaves, where I can write my application to leverage that technology so that data is always encrypted, even when it's being used by the CPU. So the offering is now 37% cheaper. So good news if you're using those. On the networking side, so ExpressRoute Global Reach also has a price reduction. So now the data transfer is 50% less. And just a kind of a quick review, if we think about ExpressRoute, remember we have kind of that Microsoft backbone network, and hanging off of that we have all kind of the various Azure regions, etc. Then I have my location. So the idea here is, hey look, maybe I have a location here in Dallas. So I'm using a certain meet me, so that meet me, let's say, is in Dallas. And the meet me, remember, is where the Microsoft backbone network has connections into. I then have a connection where they're cross-connected that gets me onto that backbone network. And from there, I can now go and talk to all the different Azure regions. But I also have an office, in this case, you could say London. So I'm actually using a London meet me. And once again, that Microsoft backbone is extended into there, and I have that connection. So once again, I can get to all the different regions. If it's ExpressRoute Premium, I can get to regions outside even my kind of continent. So from London, I can get to all the regions. From Dallas, I can get to all the regions, but they cannot talk to each other. I would have to have my own kind of network or MPLS for my London and my Dallas locations to talk. So what ExpressRoute Global Reach does, it actually lets me have my locations talk to each other using the Microsoft backbone network. So now via that meet me, it can now actually traverse that Microsoft backbone network and talk in each direction. So that is ExpressRoute Global Reach. And essentially that is what they have now reduced the price of. So there you go. So this can be useful maybe if you're using different countries where those ISPs don't offer a connection to each other. So now, hey, I can use the Microsoft backbone network, or maybe just use it as a backup network if something happened to my primary network. So that's now cheaper. On the storage side, so storage account key rotation and expiration policies. So remember, the storage account keys are these all-powerful keys that if I have it, I can do anything to the storage account. We try to not use these so much. With things like blob and queue, I can actually now use Azure AD data plane role-based access control, so that's preferable. I can even disable the use of these access keys, but essentially what they're doing now, there are actually policies to help do that rotation of the keys automatically. And of course, Key Vault is a great way to actually do that management, actually store them in Key Vault and do that rotation. A ton of database announcements this week. So PostgreSQL Flexible. So remember, the Flexible is the offering that's built on virtual machines instead of kind of those containers. With the Flexible, I can use things like the burstable VMs to really optimize my cost. I can do stop-start of them, and it uses premium managed disks for the actual data. So it's separating the compute from the data. So they now have these minor version supporters. If I think about things like 13.2, 12.6, 11.11, it's supporting the latest minor versions of the PostgreSQL. They have a lot of kind of security updates, bug fixes, etc. You'll just get automatically upgraded to those. So in my maintenance window, I'm going to get those new minor versions. And now it does support Postgres version 13, and that's in preview. PostgreSQL Hyperscale has some new certifications. Remember, the Hyperscale offering is built on Citus. What Citus does, remember, is it basically shards the data, so I can now have multiple compute instances with their own data instances to distribute the load horizontally to really give me kind of this infinite scale. So what it is, this Hyperscale offering now has these various new certifications: High Trust, ISO 27001, PCI DSS, and Spain ENS High. So we have these new certifications for PostgreSQL. Then single server. So this was kind of the traditional version of the open source managed databases built on more the container technologies. So when we say all, we're talking about PostgreSQL, MariaDB, and MySQL. So all three of those offerings now have planned maintenance notifications. So this is the idea that at least 72 hours in advance, I will get notified of any maintenance. And I think it's always a minimum of 30 days between those maintenance operations. So I will now get those notifications. I'll get notification if there's a delay. I get all of that information. And Defender for each of those services, so there's Defender for Postgres, from MariaDB, for MySQL, has now gone GA. So remember, we see Defender for huge numbers of the Azure services today. So these are looking at the interactions with the service. So from a database perspective, it's looking at types of activity that may be suspicious and flag that to us. If it sees a type of attack, it will flag that attack and say, hey, this is kind of the meter attack actually tactic that's being used. How I can investigate, how I can mitigate, and then actually linking into things like Sentinel to continue that investigation. So now Defender is available for all three of kind of those Azure open source managed database offerings. And MySQL now has flexible standby AZ support. So again, with the flexible, i.e. that VM-based option, you can optionally turn on a highly available replica. That gives me automated failover. And what I can now do is not only can I set the availability zone of my primary, that standby I optionally create, I can say, actually, I want that in a different availability zone to give me kind of better resiliency for an AZ level incident. And then for SQL Managed Instance, now the resource health view is kind of GA. This is really all about, hey, if there is some issue, I can go to the resource health option in my Blade for SQL MI, and it will show me information about current and past events that may be impacting my performance, impacting the availability of my service. The miscellaneous. So there's been a change to policy compliance for resource type policies. So if we jump over super quickly, if we just go and look, just to show you what these are. So if I jump over to my kind of subscription quickly, and if I search for policy, if we look at our definitions, we'll see there are, well, we have these resource, actually should be allowed resource, I think I'm looking for, allowed resource. So you notice you see these not allowed resource types and allowed resource types. And as the name suggests, I can define types of resource that I'm going to allow or not allow, and then I assign this. The challenge was for these policies, the way it worked in the past, if there were any out of compliance, it would show that as a percentage. Well, if I have thousands and thousands of resources and just a few out of compliance, it would still show me as nearly 100% compliant. It's very hard to see that. So what they've actually done is, as of the 16th of June, they're going to change the behavior. So if everything is in compliance, I'm going to show as 100% compliant. But if I have anything, any number of resources that are not compliant, compliance will now show as 0%. So it'll be super obvious if I'm out of compliance. And then if I actually go and look at the details around that, it will show me the actual number of non-compliant resources I have. But it's now going to make it far more visible to actually see if I have out of compliance for this type of policy. So that's why they're making the change, to make it more obvious. Azure Migrate now supports private endpoints. Remember, private endpoints project a service into my virtual network with an IP from my virtual network that represents that particular instance. So now for Azure Migrate, if I think about, hey, I have an ExpressRoute connection to that virtual network with the private endpoint or a site-to-site VPN, when I use Azure Migrate for my analysis, when I use it for my actual server migrations, all of those activities will now actually talk to the private endpoint. So it's not going out to the public endpoint of Azure Migrate. It will go through my ExpressRoute private peering or my site-to-site VPN and talk to the private endpoint on my VNet to use the Azure Migrate service. There's basically a bug. So the Azure Monitor agent is the agent everything is moving to. The Log Analytics agent, the Azure Diagnostics agent, Telegraph extension is all combining into the new Azure Monitor agent. It uses data collection rules to drive, hey, what data should it collect and where should it send it to? Azure Monitor Metrics, Log Analytics Workspace. Well, there was basically a bug, and it wasn't correctly collecting from Linux machines the syslog event collection data. That's fixed. So in the latest version 1.10 and above, it now collects that data correctly. Service principal access reviews are in preview. So remember, access reviews are an Azure AD feature that traditionally let me kind of evaluate users and groups for, hey, do they still need this group membership? Do they still need this role assignment? Do they still need this application assignment? Well, my service principals, they also might have kind of privileged roles, and now I can actually run an access review against those as well. So if we jump back over and look just to show you kind of where this is, if I go home, go to my Azure AD, and I'm going to go to my identity governance. So I'm over here looking at identity governance. In my identity governance, I'm going to go and look at, in this case, I'll look at my Azure AD roles here, and I'm going to look at access reviews. And what I'll now get the option for, if I create a new access review, is sure, we get the kind of standard view of users and groups, but notice now I also have service principals. So this will actually now allow me to think about, hey, I want to create an access review and actually target service principals. In this case, looking to see, hey, they have certain roles. I can pick someone that I actually want to do that review. So I would now select reviewers. Because I can't do a self-review or managers for service principals. I have to actually nominate someone. So I would say who I want to do this review, and then they can actually go through. I would select the various, for example, role memberships in this case, and someone could say, yes, this service principal still needs that role, or hey, we want to do something about that. So this is cool. There's often a desire for how can I go and check on service principals. Now we can see that. And then 5 more services have been added to the Azure free account. Remember, the Azure free account is this idea that, hey, I get a certain bucket of money. I think it's $200 for the first month. Then there's certain services that are free for 12 months. And then there are services that are kind of always free. So what they've added is certain amounts of Postgres, MySQL, Key Vault, Logic Apps, and media encoding features are now part of that free account as well. So I can now go and use other types of service. And that's it. I hope that was useful as always. Any kind of questions or feedback, put it in the comments below. That's where I kind of go and check. But until next week, take care.